man that acts like a child.
Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Eric,
And I'm Ty.
and we are ShantottoCast.
Yep, we're back at it again. We're back in the saddle. And sadly, Eric, this is our last episode. This is our last episode. So if you guys
This
haven't
is
heard
news
it,
to me.
yeah, I've fallen on some hard times, so I decided to start up a new podcast. I'm defecting, and it's going to be called Nikke Cast. It's entirely based on Nikke Goddess of Victory, the game you've been seeing a bunch of annoying ads for. And I'm a top one player. What can I say? I have sponsorship deals. Nikke's reached out to me, so I'm going to pursue that. And I'm sorry. My wife has also left me because of my obsession with 2D anime girls.
God, you waifu trash. Wow.
Yeah, I'll have to take it.
How much are they offering you, Ty? What are they offering you? I'll double it.
A free 10 pull every other day.
I can't match that crap.
We're not in it for the money. We're in it for the waifus. Anyway,
This is what I deal with, folks.
yeah. Welcome to my requiem. And seeing as I'm holding a huge L, we're gonna teach you how to hold a huge L when you're on a losing streak.
Yep. Something that Ty is not terribly intimately familiar with, but I am. So we're gonna walk you through, what it's like to lose a bunch and how to bounce back from it.
Yeah.
Because losing can hit you hard in pretty much any game you play, right? Like what happens when you lose a lot more than everybody else? What's it like when you lose game after game consistently and consecutively, despite what you feel is playing well and doing the right things, and you feel like you have a good deck? How does that affect your mental state? How does that influence your consecutive games after, right? Your subsequent games might suffer because of that. So, I can give perspective because I play RTS games. StarCraft players actually regularly pay real money for pro level coaching and analysis of their replays. It helps them get get an outside opinion from a better player about what they can improve on, where they thought they were doing well already. And that coaching can actually sometimes be disheartening for some people because they take it personally, or they kind of feel the dread that they haven't really improved as much as they felt they had. And that can have an understandably negative effect on their mental state. But when those people are able to pull back and keep a level head on things and really listen to the feedback they're getting and put it in context, then they almost always get results.
Yeah. And as I've said on the show before, I have a history in fighting games, and fighting games are actually much of the same, with some differences. So the one thing in fighting games that we always go to is going back to the lab, as it's generally called. It's when you go into training mode, you're just running against that one thing over and over. If you can kind of isolate, like, oh, I lost because I didn't know how to punish this move, you're going to sit there for an hour and say, okay, how can I punish this move? Why should I punish this move? Like, what puts me into the situation? And then also we just kind of ask around, or we'll play with friends and say, like, hey, can you play this character? I need to figure out, like, how to do this. And then you just generally cool off with just some casual games. Maybe you're playing other characters for a little bit before you hop back into ranked or another tournament.
Yeah. And so in FFTCG, a lot of people go to locals with their new deck, and they're excited to play some games and hoping to kick some ass, right? You just built a new deck, you want to use it, you want to fire off some rounds, and then they play through some practice matches, make some tweaks, and the night's tournament starts, and then they lose the majority of their matches. It's a real feel bad, so much so that sometimes you don't even register the wins in your head. All you can focus on is the overwhelming quantity of losses.
Yeah.
We often hear stuff like, "Oh, I went 1-5 tonight." It's lamenting. It beats on you. It wears you down.
Yeah, it does really get to you. And like, one of the things is, especially, you're like so excited to show up with this new deck. Like, it's fresh, it's new, it's cool. Maybe you got the awesome list from FF decks, and then you're just hitting wall after wall after wall. It sucks. It sucks.
Yep. A story all too common.
All too common.
Yeah. So when you lose a bunch of games in a row, or you even go through multiple play sessions without a significant victory, it can really hit you where you live, right? It gets under your skin, whether you get mad or sad or somewhere in between or outside that. It can be really hard to take a step back and see the bigger picture, figuring out why you lost, not just how and how many times. Did you genuinely have bad matchups all night? Did you play against a lot of meta decks and you're not playing meta? Did you only face more experienced players than you? Were you in a bad mood, or did you have narrow thinking? Did you forget a ruling or misread a card? Did you misplay at a critical moment? Or did your opponent just get lucky?
Sometimes you hit that 6-drop Leviathan burst, and you're like, I don't know how to play around that.
Yep. Like it's just rough, and you don't know whether that made or broke the game. These and many other factors can be huge things to consider when looking at what happened.
Yeah.
Nobody builds a meme deck or a pauper deck then, expects to win against anything but other meme or pauper decks. It's a deck when you build a deck, you hope to win with it. And that's the best case scenario for a lot of those like lower level like pet deck type situations.
Yeah, your category 4 fun deck, or your I really like Oron deck, or Prish Power, whoever would run that. Like it, you sometimes you have to kind of look at like kind of what you're bringing to the table. Like once again, if you're playing a pet deck or just like a fun deck, you shouldn't, like, obviously you can improve the deck, but there's a certain level of it where that when you're approaching a tournament or like an official event, or when you know you're going to be playing against people who have these meta decks, you have to kind of look at it and just say like, well, what am I bringing to the table?
Exactly. I mean, here's the thing. Like if you go to an event with a pet deck and you get like top 4,
Mhm.
that's awesome and you absolutely deserve the accolades, but
Yeah.
nobody expects to do that with a pet deck or like a joke deck or
Yeah.
like if you're a new player and you don't really understand the game as well yet.
Yeah, because you may even have this like kind of idealized version where you go undefeated and then you're just like, I just found this whole like new meta deck. Like turns out that category 5 and category 6 together in one deck is like super meta. And like there's times when people have discovered that. Like if I remember correctly, the Fire Ice 6 deck that became meta for a while, I believe was a pet deck first. It was someone who just really
Yeah.
liked 6. So that can happen, but you also have to understand like if you go in with this experimental deck, just don't expect it to just do everything that you want it to do and beat all the meta. It's fun to play, and I always show up with at least one pet deck. I mean, hell, Soiree was supposed to be a pet deck for me, which
Well, we
became a
saw how
little
that turned out. Yeah.
became
I
a
mean,
little
I
bit
was a
better
little
than
the
we
same.
planned. Yeah.
Yeah. But basically, the phrase that a lot of people use is curb your expectations. And
Mhm.
that's not to say you should expect to lose everything and, go in going, well, time to eat, eat it today.
Yeah.
But, take the victories take those with more, more pride than you let the losses hit you in the
Mhm.
pride. Harkening, going back to, other games and what it's like, one common analogy we hear is Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
We hear a lot of people talk about how good they are in Smash because everybody plays Smash. But then when it comes time to play against other players who know what they're doing, those people flop really hard.
Yeah.
And often the question comes, was it nerves? Was it counter picks or matchup? Was it arrogance? More often than not, though, it
Yeah. Did
actually
I have a
turns
bad
out that
stage
they,
pick?
yeah, like more often than not, though, it turns out they were just playing solo against level 9 bots and they thought that was the peak. Then they realize there's a whole
Yeah.
world of hurt out there for them when they find they find other players who, they eat level 9 bots to keep their hands warm between rounds. But yeah, so how do you turn it around? We have some ideas we've written down for you guys. So we're gonna walk you through, what those are and how to
Yeah.
try to get yourself back in control of your losing winning situation. So Ty, do you want to start with step one?
Yeah. So step one, and this is one that I see a lot of people kind of ignore. I've seen it in fighting games. I've seen it in card games a lot too. But the first step is to calm down. And I know that sounds a little like diminishing, like, but sometimes like after losing a bunch, like it puts you in a sour mental state. Like you play this game to win. Like losing sucks. Like obviously the game has two players. One person has to lose. I think what I'm trying to get at is that you just need to take a step back, just kind of say like, it's a game. I really like this game, and I want to get better at it. But first, I have to calm down. I have to kind of think about it a little bit longer. Like, kind of take your mind off of it, maybe switch to a different deck, like, have some fun, just relax. At the end of the day, it's a game. You're playing it to enjoy it, but you need to just chill. We've seen a lot of players who, after 2 or 3 games, will talk about how like they want to sell their deck, or they're planning on like leaving the game, or just like, oh well, if I'm like, clearly this is a downturn, or like I got top 2 or top 1 at my locals before, but this day I went like 1 and 3. Chill. Everyone has bad times. Everyone has losing streaks. The best players have lost a bunch. Like, there's that common phrase that it's, the person who does the best has failed the most. You just have to take a moment, chill, breathe, calm down. And then we can move on to step 2, where you could kind of focus on what made you lose.
Yeah, losing equips you to win. As someone who loves Dark Souls and Souls likes as well, sometimes you need to, when you're stuck on a boss, sometimes you need to, just put the game down, come back later, and just have a fresh set of eyes for yourself and an attitude of determination towards improvement. And sometimes it's all it takes is just a little break. Not too long of a break because then you get really rusty. But
Yeah.
just give it a couple days. Just give it some time to mellow out and just breathe.
Mhm. Yeah. Breathe. Yeah. That's actually a really good a quick aside. There was a year at Evo where I played against this Chun Li player, and he was really good. He was amazing, and I squeaked out a game against him. He didn't know the T Hawk matchup, and afterwards, he literally was just like seething. And I watched his next game, and he was making all these mistakes that he didn't make against me, and I was just like kind of watching him, like, oh, like he's really mad. Like, I think he expected to just go into the first game and win it, and but it
You
like
tilted him.
being yeah, he got tilted, and I felt bad. But it's one of those things that that will follow you through your other games if you're in that sour mood. And even if you go into another event with that sour mood, you're gonna have that like kind of fog and like haze about you when you play, and it
Mhm.
drags you down. Like, you're if you stay in this negative mental state, you're gonna get worse. So just calm down, relax, try to get yourself out of that mental state, and as you put it, like, maybe take a break, just don't get rusty.
Yeah. So, and that leads us into step two. And step two is focus on why you lost and don't really make excuses. Be honest with yourself to determine the source of the issue or issues. One of them can be your mindset. One of those issues can be, the state your brain is in and what you're kind of sitting there and you're focusing on being frustrated. But it helps to sit back and think about, whether, for example, your opponents are able to fluster you easily. Think about your play style and what vulnerabilities it leaves open for your opponents to exploit. Think about whether your opponents really meant to rub it in afterward, or if you just took the loss personally and that kind of skewed your view of their feedback or chatter afterward.
Yeah.
Another thing you can look at is your deck. As we mentioned before, what type of deck are you currently playing, and what do you usually play? What opportunities does that leave your opponent to take advantage of? If you're playing aggro, you're going to get disrupted really easily. And so you can't really blame your opponent for knowing that aggro is vulnerable to this, that, whatever. Do you rely on a single card to win you every game, or do you have fragile strategies that crumble in the face of any type of disruption or interaction from your
Yeah.
opponent?
Are you lacking consistency? Are you having trouble getting those really good cards? Are you having trouble getting your game plan started? You're never seeing the right cards at the right time.
Exactly. And then another thing to look at is your opponent. Do you keep getting paired against that guy at locals? That one person that you think is kind of a jerk, and or they just have such better decks than you that you just feel like you're never going to beat them for one reason or another. Do you find your opponents always seem to know the answers or make decisions you weren't expecting or that you don't understand?
Mhm.
Do your opponents get under your skin with certain plays or cards or even certain ways that they talk during a game?
Mhm.
Any of those things can completely throw you off. But you have to be honest with yourself and check if it's, kind of an external or internal situation. in terms of what's, making you upset or what's bothering you about your losses.
Yeah.
Usually in Final Fantasy, there's a couple of factors as to why somebody loses. Ty already brought up one or two of these. Do you not have the right cards to deal with a situation the opponent has created? And that kind of has a sub point of, does your deck have a solid, concise construction? One thing about this game is despite affordability and availability of cards, people often find themselves struggling to build a strong deck, or more accurately, they're a little scared away from buying cards to build a stronger version of their deck.
Yeah.
Even if you tell somebody, yeah, this card is like $5, they might still hesitate.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like something that we should probably put a quick asterisk on is like, if I guess when it comes to like affording cards, like obviously if you can't afford a playset of All Cid, who's sitting at 48 right now as of recording, don't get down on yourself for not being able to afford a card. One of the other things that we're going to mention, actually, this is probably a good point to mention it, is like explore other budget options and explore other budget decks. Final Fantasy is known for being a relatively cheap card game as compared to Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic, and there is always going to be a meta deck that is on the cheaper end. And it might be worth it to explore that if you can't pursue that, or if you can't pursue Ice Lightning, or what's another really expensive deck right now? Storm.
Mono Wind.
Storm and Mono Wind. Like obviously, it's kind of hard for anyone to pick up a playset of Bismarck right now. So you also need to understand the budget of your deck and kind of use that to temper your expectations as well. Like obviously, you want to do as good as you can, but yeah, also understand like if my deck, let's say I'm running like a nice Lightning deck, but I don't have Sephiroths and I don't have All Cids, like I'm gonna have a little trouble. And in a way, I have to temper my expectations with that, curb my expectations with that.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is in the opposite extreme, don't be the Joey Wheeler that just constantly is buying expensive cards and thinking the cards are going to make you a better player.
Yeah.
Because the cards don't change how you make your decisions. You change how you make your decisions. One of the things that made me a better player, one of the most extreme things that made me a better player was understanding, I have to kind of like the means of establishing a board. And once I sat down and realized how that worked compared to how I'd previously been doing it, I immediately became a significantly better player. I'm not the best in my area. I'm not the pinnacle of skill, but I am certainly better than I was. And comparing to your previous self is always going to be healthier than comparing to your peers.
Yeah.
Because comparing to your peers, you're always just going to be trying to strive higher and higher to, heights you may never reach. But comparing to your previous self, you'll see the progress. Look at the path behind you, not the path in front of you.
Yeah. Especially like something I noticed is Final Fantasy has a lot of people who haven't played card games at all before, or they've played like some Yu-Gi-Oh! And then they lose to these people who have been playing card games forever. We have a couple of people at our locals that they used to play Magic, like a lot. They played Modern, they played a lot of Magic. So they already have this previous experience. And even my previous experience with Yu-Gi-Oh! And some in Magic has helped me get to this point. So when I know all these interactions and stuff, it's not because I started the same time you did and I'm just better at learning them. It's because I've been playing long. And everyone can hit that. Like everyone can eventually get to there, because we've had players in our community that Final Fantasy is their first FFT or is their first TCG, and they're amazing.
Yeah, it really just depends on a lot of different factors, but ultimately everybody can get there. Everybody will get to a relatively decent equilibrium with the other players around them. Just takes time. I know a new player down in Florida who went to one of his locals, and he hadn't played a lot of card games before. He played some Yu-Gi-Oh, some Magic, but Final Fantasy is one of the games he's taking seriously. And he ended up taking out a mono ice deck and going 5-1 at one of his first locals. So like, it's possible. You can do it. It's just a matter of figuring out how to get there. Yeah. And that's what we're here for. Other factors that we haven't talked about yet, were things like not being able to properly start the game plan of your deck, which might be the deck, might be you, might be both. Might be a key misplay that, you made that altered the game's trajectory. Or sometimes you weren't able to, put up a significant roadblock in your opponent's game plan. And so if you can figure out why you lost, that's when you start moving on to the next step. And Ty, do you want to cover that one?
Yes. So the next step, and in several ways, like kind of the final step, is to change and adapt. So once you kind of find out what causes these losses, look at what you're doing and how you're playing, and try to find a new way forward. So like the first question is like, did I have the right cards? And one of the first answers is to really look at the ratios of your deck. Is there a card that you wish you saw more? Is there a card that you didn't see enough or you felt like you really needed way better? Kind of look at how many you're running. Like I think a good example of this is a card like Mist Dragon. Like Mist Dragon is a very good card in certain matchups. So a lot of people will run anywhere between 1 and 3. Well, if you're running it at 1 and you're playing against a lot of graveyard strategies, like, would you want to see that more? Maybe do you even need to run Iridia to search it? Why weren't you seeing that enough? And then also ask yourself, like, how does your deck do in the current meta? Are you running a forward heavy deck in a removal heavy meta? Are you running a slow deck in an aggressive meta? Sometimes your deck just may not be good or may be very good against the larger meta game, but your local meta is so like precise and so weighted towards one certain kind of deck that it can be hard for the deck that you're playing to compete with that. Another answer is to switch decks. Thanks to FF decks, we have a large array of available deck lists. If you don't understand why you lost to a certain deck, maybe play it, learn it, like try to find out why the deck works so well. FF decks, like kind of solitaire feature is really good for this, where you just kind of play through a couple turns and say like, oh, this is how this deck gets there, or like that's why this person always had an Althea. By playing it, you can kind of find out what's wrong with the deck, what might be good against the deck, and you may even find that you enjoy the deck yourself and you may want to build it. That's happened to me a tons, especially with wind decks. I generally try to avoid playing wind, but when I lose to enough wind decks, I'll usually take a minute and just be like, okay, I gotta play this. Like I gotta find out why. Alternatively, like you may find where the deck falters and you could find a really good card that can capitalize on that. You could find a way to capitalize on that weakness.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I do when I play fighting games,
Mhm.
as infrequently as I play them. But when I'm losing to a certain character a lot, I'm like, okay, let's play this character and figure out why the hell they're so good. Why, but what can I do against them as my characters?
Yeah.
Do I need to sweep the legs more often? do I need
Yeah.
to do we need to get airborne more often? Do I need to zone them out? Do I need to, do more grabs, etc.? So,
Yeah. To bring up a Final Fantasy related one of my issues against Wind as a person who loves to play ice is I always had trouble with Althea. And it took me a couple games to realize, like, especially when I have to dull and freeze a backup, even if they already have another wind backup, or if they're playing, like, let's say they're playing Wind Ice Storm, because sometimes I'll dull and freeze the ice just to lock them out of ice for the turn, but sometimes it's worth it to do it on Althea, just so they don't get the bounce, just to give them, like, less advantage on it. Like, there's reasons, or you kind of find those key cards that it's like, oh, if I was playing this deck, I would really hate it if this happened to me, so I'm going to do that to that deck. And then the next question is like, how do I prevent misplays? This is my favorite thing to talk about. After you play against someone, it's worth it to just ask them and talk to your opponent. So any really good player will be able to like kind of memorize like what key points of the game happened, where they were able to turn it around, or like certain decisions that they made that led to them winning. So talk to your opponent after the game. Even just asking in fighting games, like I would usually ask if I got, especially if I got like stomped, I'd ask like, can you give me some pointers? Is there something I'm missing? Like, can you walk me through that combo one more time? And people are just happy to play and happy to talk about like what they did. And this also applies to TCGs. People love talking about their decks. I know I love talking about my decks. And most high-end players will memorize the game, point out decisions, and by understanding what they were thinking when they were playing can help you understand it, like how you were playing from a fresh perspective.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, even looking through that, looking through the kind of, I guess, the mental replay of the scenario,
Mm.
you can understand yourself a little bit better too, because you see patterns in yourself or your opponents. That gives you a whole lot of insight into how, you work with the game, how, your opponent might work with the game, how your deck goes, etc.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that kind of leans into the next point that I'm gonna kind of take from Ty, because I do this pretty often,
Yeah.
is crowdsourcing. Ask your play group for ideas. If you play with a certain group of people enough, they'll notice things about you as well,
Mhm.
and they'll be able to present ideas for you that you normally might not think of on your own. Some of our most interesting decks, and card choices were forged through our group chats and discussion. And, sometimes even our Fix It Fridays where I'm helping somebody else with their deck. And then, I go, oh, hey, what about this car? Oh my God, that fits into three of my decks.
Mhm.
Or like, hey, have you thought, and then someone in chat will go, hey, have you thought about this? And I'm like, whoa, I didn't think about that. This is why we do that. That's exactly why we do Fix It Fridays.
Yeah, which
Like that
we
alone.
got to do another one, but
We do.
hopefully TM after I move. TM, we'll get
Yeah.
there. And then a point I kind of skipped over: misplays and rulings. So there's been several times during my matches where I'll look at a potential path and a potential play I could make, but I'm not sure if it works rulings wise. So I can think of probably like a dozen games that I've lost because of a ruling I didn't know. And to use a very fresh example, Eric and I played, I want to say about like 2 weeks ago, and I was running a Man in Black build, and I wasn't sure if after I attack with Man in Black and after I exile, or after I remove from game a summon, if I had a chance to play it before you declared blockers. And I didn't want to push it. I was a little worried about it, so I avoided it. And I almost lost the game because of it, where it took me calling over one of our better players, Brian, and asking him like, "Hey, do I have this like opportunity?" And he told me like, "Yeah, you go into this step, and then you can actually play that summon." And I looked at it, I was like, "Oh, I could have won this game like 10 turns ago." Like it's worth it to like ask. If you're not sure, like ask. It's better for you to know the ruling so you could use it going forward, because you never know when that scenario is going to come up again, or that ruling might even help influence like another way that you look at a card where you could say like, oh, if I know I can do this, then this can work with that. Another good example of this is Charlotte. 2-drop Charlotte is surprisingly good anti-Tyro tech, where if the opponent taps a Tyro, they have to target Charlotte, which
Yeah. That one's that's a dirty
that's
one.
that's my favorite ruling in the entire
So
game.
rude.
And it's not so much a ruling as it is Tyro's text. But a lot of people like kind of ignore that or they forget about it. And it's really fun to exploit. Like the more you know these obscure or weird rulings, you'd be surprised in how often that those come up in your games. So game knowledge, I guess, is my point. If you're not sure, ask. And then our final point, and this is kind of an optional answer, like not everyone wants to do this, and that's understandable, but research, research, research. FFTCG is still pretty small. Like, we don't have the same resources or match replays at the level of Magic the Gathering or Yu Gi Oh! But there's still tons of good content creators, asterisk, wink, wink, asterisk, that have done great write ups on decks and synergies. The most recent write up about Storm from the Hobby Japan Gaming Magazine, which you're going to have to translate, but Google Translate actually does a pretty good job on it. Gives great insight on how the player feels about their recent topping Storm deck and decisions that went into it. And then for a quick shout out, the Card Combo Show has been really good at kind of pointing out these interesting synergies or these interesting combos between cards. You have Level 1 Onion Knight, who's been doing really good write ups. The Crystarium is also really good. Usually, when there's a new Crystarium article, someone will post it in chat and everyone just like hops on it. But
Yep.
just explore the game through other lenses, and hopefully, we end up getting more content creators into the game so it's a little easier to see that. But yeah, like research.
Yeah, research is a huge one. Research and crowdsourcing basically are two of the best ways to get yourself to a higher level of play and understanding of the game. And so even then when you lose, you're able to more calmly and neutrally understand why
Mhm.
with an objective mindset as opposed to just kind of taking it personally, getting frustrated with yourself or your opponent makes you kind of feel a little bit less negatively, even if you don't feel better. You know what? Sometimes there are times where you will learn to feel good about a loss because you're like, okay, that's data. That's something for me to analyze.
Yeah.
You learn more by losing than by winning,
Yeah.
more often than not.
Yeah, and something that we didn't write down, but I think is probably a better final point than just research is just play
Hmm.
the game. A lot of really good players have a lot of experience. They've played a lot and they've lost a lot, and sometimes the way to just get better is to just play the deck. we talked about earlier, like you show up to locals, you have this brand new fancy deck. Maybe you got the most recent Zankarid top one deck and you're playing around with it and you lose. Well, also understand you need experience with that deck. You need experience with the game. You need to sit down and play and play and play. And that's how you prevent further misplays. That's how you get better with the deck. That's how you're able to like more precisely find out like, oh, that's why I lost, or oh, that's why I won. But play, play, play is the number one piece of advice I think you could give in any competitive game.
Yeah, absolutely. Ty, did you pronounce Xanarkand Zankrid?
Xanarkand?
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 Zanarkand?
Boonvanels?
Sorry, yeah, Boonavels as Boonvanels.
Boonvanels.
But yeah, so always play, always talk to people, always just strive to understand the game better, strive to understand yourself better, and you'll go far. You'll be fine. Not to be dismissive, but you will get there if if you are determined enough to get there, you will get there.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that about wraps it up.
Yep.
We've given a couple shout outs to some other creators already. But once again, check out Card Combo Show, Level 1 Onion Night, and the Crystarium, as well as write ups from Hobby Japan Game Magazine.
Yep.
And, hopefully that'll get you guys all of where you need to be. And we hope to catch you guys in another episode or at a Fix It Friday.
Yep. We'll see. And then I guess we should just do a quick life update because it's been a while.
This is true.
Eric and I are still within driving distance of each other, so don't worry. We still love each
don't
other.
Worry about that.
Parents aren't. Also, as a little asterisk to our opening bit, I'm not getting divorced.
Yeah, no, it's that would actually be pretty grim.
Yeah. We maybe sit through a half-hour episode first before confirmation, but worth noting.
No, that's our hook, man. That's how we get them to stick around.
Yeah. But after I move, I'm going to have like a little mini studio where I'll be able to record a lot more. So I admit that most of it's been kind of on my end. But hopefully we can start producing more. We say that every time, but we want to get out more than 5 episodes a year.
Yeah, that'd be optimal. I'm also moving soon. Hopefully we're closing on our house by the end of the month.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually have a gap between when I can move into there. So I'll still have some time to record before I start moving.
Mm-hmm.
But my computer will be the last thing I move. So I'll still be able to record at the old place anyway.
Dope.
Well, with that out of the way, we will catch you guys later.
Peace.
Bye.